Hi. Okay, so obviously you guys know that I don't use Canvas ever, and I'm really bad at technology, so this is gonna be my first try, but I know that a lot of you said that you feel more comfortable when we read things out loud and when I'm able to actually explain what's going on in the book, and we could talk about stuff, and obviously we won't be able to talk about things here, but at least this way I'm gonna try to do this where I'll read the chapters to you and I can explain what I would have explained as if you were in class. And so that's what I'm gonna go with. So, okay, we left off last time. We are halfway through chapter 3 right now. You guys should be able to start on page 52. So I'm gonna start with there. Okay, so where we left off, let's see. They were talking about Curly's wife at the very end. We talked about, let's see. They talked about Lenny having his puppy from Slim. And Candy and Carlson were discussing Candy's old dog. Carlson thinks the dog stinks and that the dog is just kind of gross and it's sad and old and that they should maybe shoot the dog to put it out of its misery. Candy does not want to shoot the dog at first, and then Carlson kind of convinces him that it's in the dog's best interest to do that. So they shoot the dog, which is really sad, depressing, and so it's kind of right after they've shot his dog, and everybody starts talking about Curly and Curly's wife. Okay, so we're at the top of page 52 if you want to follow along while I read. Whit said, "If you got ideas, you ought to come in town with us guys tomorrow night." "Why? What's doing?" "Just the usual thing. We're going to old Susie's place. Hell of a nice place. Old Susie's a laugh, always cracking jokes. Like she says when we come up on the front porch last Saturday night. Susie opens the door and then she yells over her shoulder, 'Get your coats on, girls. Here comes the sheriff.' She never talks dirty neither. Got 5 girls there." "What's to set you back?" George asked. 2.5. You get a shot for 2 bits. Susie got a nice chairs to set in too. If that guy don't want to flop, why he can just sit in the chairs and have a couple or 3 shots and pass the time of day. And Susie don't give a damn. She ain't rushing guys through and kicking them out if they don't want to flop." Okay, so in this part, they're talking about basically like a brothel. So talking about going into town and paying to sleep with women in this brothel. "Might go and look the joint over," said George. "Sure, come along. It's a hell of a lot of fun. Her cracking jokes all the time. And Susie's like the person that runs the place. Like she says one time, she says, 'I've knew people that if they got a rag rug on the floor and a Cupid doll lamp on the phonograph, they think they're running a parlor house.' That's Clara's house she's talking about. And Susie says, 'I know what you boys want,' she says. 'My girls is clean,' she says, 'and there ain't no water in my whiskey,' she says. 'If any of you guys want to look at a Cupid doll lamp and take your own chance getting burned, why, you know where to go.' And she says, 'There's guys around here walking bow-legged because they look at a Cupid doll lamp.'" George asked, "Clara runs the other house, huh?" "Yeah," said Whit. "We don't never go there. Clara got $3 a crack and 35 cents a shot, and she don't crack no jokes. But Susie's place is clean and she got nice chairs. Don't let no goo-goos in neither." "Me and Lenny's rolling up a steak," said George. "I might go in and set and have a shot, but I ain't putting out no 2.5. "Well, a guy gotta have some fun sometime," said Whit. Okay, so they're trying to convince George to come into town with them and basically spend money at this brothel. And he says, "No, Lenny and I have bigger plans. We're going to do stuff. We don't want to spend our money and waste it in this place." The door opened and Lenny and Carlson came in together. Lenny crept to his bunk and sat down, trying not to attract attention. Carlson reached under his bunk and brought out his bag. He didn't look at old Candy, who still faced the wall. Carlson found a little cleaning rod in the bag and a can of oil. He laid them on his bed and then brought out the pistol, took out the magazine, and snapped the loaded shell from the chamber. Then he fell to cleaning the barrel with the little rod. When the ejector snapped, Candy turned over and looked for a moment at the gun before he turned back to the wall again. Carlson said casually, "Curly been in yet?" "No," said Whit. "What's eating on Curly?" Carlson squinted down the barrel of his gun. "Looking for his old lady. I seen him going round and round outside." Whit said sarcastically, "He spends half his time looking for her and the rest of the time she's looking for him." Curly burst into the room excitedly. "Any of you guys seen my wife?" he demanded. "She ain't been here," said Whit. Curly looked threateningly about the room. "Where the hell's Slim?" "Went out in the barn," said George. He was going to put some tar on a split hoof. Curly's shoulders dropped and squared. How long ago did he go? 5, 10 minutes. Curly jumped out the door and banged in after him. Whit stood up. I guess maybe I'd like to see this, he said. Curly's just spoiling or he wouldn't start for Slim. And Curly's handy, goddamn handy. Got in the finals for the Golden Gloves. He got newspaper clippings about it, he considered. But just the same, he better leave Slim alone. Nobody don't know what Slim can do. So, okay, remember we talked about earlier that Curly is all about boxing. So now I found out that not only he's into boxing, but he was really good at it too. So he's kind of going to try to maybe confront Slim about talking to his wife, and the guys want to go see the fight. Thinks Slim's with his wife, don't he? Said George. Looks like it, Whit said. Of course Slim ain't. At least I don't think Slim is. But I'd like to see the fuss if it comes off. Come on, let's go. George said, I'm staying right here. I don't want to get mixed up in nothing. Lenny and me got to make a steak. Carlson finished the cleaning of the gun and put it in the bag and pushed the bag under his bunk. I guess I'll go out and look for her, he said. Old Candy lay still, and Lenny from his bunk watched George cautiously. When Whit and Carlson were gone and the door closed after them, George turned to Lenny. What you got on your mind? I ain't done nothing, George. Slim says I better not get them pups so much for a while. Slim says it ain't good for them. So I come right in. I've been good, George. I could have told you that, said George. Well, I wasn't hurting them none. I just had mine in my lap petting it. George asked, Did you see Slim out in the barn? Sure I did. He told me I better not pet that pup no more. Did you see that girl? You mean Curly's girl? Yeah. Did she come in the barn? No. Anyways, I never seen her. You never seen Slim talking to her? She ain't been in the barn. Okay, said George. I guess them guys ain't gonna see no fight. If there's any fighting, Lenny, you keep out of it. I don't want no fights, said Lenny. He got up from his bunk and sat down at the table across from George. Almost automatically, George shuffled the cards and laid out his solitaire hand. He used a deliberate, thoughtful slowness. Lenny reached for a face card and studied it, then turned it upside down and studied it. Both ends the same, he said. George, why is it both ends the same? I don't know, said George. That's just the way they make 'em. What was Slim doing in the barn when you seen him? Slim? Sure, you seen him in the barn and he told you not to pet the pup so much. Oh yeah, he had a can of tar and a paintbrush. I don't know what for. You sure that girl didn't come in like she came in here today? No, she never come. George sighed. You give me a good whorehouse every time, he said. A guy can go in and get drunk and get everything out of his system all at once and no messes. And he knows how much it's going to set him back. These here jailbaits is just sat on the trigger of the Husko. Lenny followed his words admiringly and moved his lips a little to keep up. George continued. You remember Andy Cushman, Lenny? Went to grammar school? The one that his old lady used to make hotcakes for the kids? Lenny asked. Yeah, that's the one. You couldn't remember anything if there's anything to eat in it. George looked carefully at the solitaire hand. He put an ace up on his scoring rack and piled a 2, 3, and 4 of diamonds on it. Andy's in San Quentin right now on account of Tart, said George. Lenny drummed on the table with his fingers. George? Huh. George, how long is it going to be till we get that little place and live on the fat of the land? And rabbits? I don't know, said George. We got to get a big steak together. I know a little place we can get cheap, but they ain't giving it away. Old Candy turned slowly over. His eyes were wide open. He watched George carefully. So right now in the bunkhouse, it's just Lenny, George, and Candy. Lenny said, Tell about that place, George. I just told you last night. Go on, tell again, George. Well, it's 10 acres, said George. Got a little windmill, got a little shack on it, and a chicken run. Got a kitchen, orchard, cherries, apples, peaches, cots, nuts, a few berries. There's a place for alfalfa and plenty of water to flood it. There's a pig pen. And rabbits, George. No place for rabbits now, but I could easily build a few hutches and you could feed alfalfa to the rabbits. Damn right I could, said Lenny. You goddamn right I could. George's hand stopped working with the cards. His voice was growing warmer. We could have a few pigs. I could build a smokehouse like the one Grandpa had, and when we kill a pig, we could smoke the bacon and the hams and make sausages and all like that. And when the salmon run upriver, we could catch 100 of them and salt them down or smoke them. We could have them for breakfast. They ain't nothing so nice as smoked salmon. When the fruit come in, we can can it. And tomatoes, they're easy to can. And every Sunday we kill a chicken or a rabbit. Maybe we'd have a cow or a goat, and the cream is so goddamn thick you can cut it with a knife and take it out with a spoon. Lenny watched him with wide eyes, and old Candy watched him too. Lenny said softly, we could live off the fat of the land. Sure, said George. All kinds of vegetables in the garden, and if we want a little whiskey, we can sell a few eggs or something and some milk. We'd just live there. We'd belong there. There wouldn't be no more run around the country and getting fed by a Jap cook. No, sir, we'd have our own place where we belonged and not sleep in no bunkhouse. Tell about the house, George, Lenny begged. Sure, we'd have a little house and room to ourselves. Little fat iron stove in the winter, we could keep a fire going in it. It ain't enough land, so we wouldn't have to work too hard. Maybe 6-7 hours a day. We wouldn't have to buck no more barley 11 hours a day. And when we put a crop, well, we'd be there to take the crop up. We'd know what'd come of our planting. And rabbits, Lenny said eagerly, and I'd take care of them. Tell how I do that, George. Sure, you'd go out in the alfalfa patch and you'd have a sack. You'd fill the sack and bring it in and put it in the rabbits' cages. Then they nibble and they nibble, said Lenny. The way they do, I seen them. Every 6 weeks or so, George continued, them does would throw a litter and we'd have plenty of rabbits to eat and to sell. And we'd keep a few pigeons to go flying around the windmill like they'd done when I was a kid. He looked raptly at the wall over Lenny's head. And it'd be our own, and nobody could can us. And if we don't like a guy, we could say, get the hell out. And by God, he'd gotta do it. And if a friend come along, why, we'd have an extra bunk and we'd say, why don't you spend the night? And by God, he would. We'd have a setter dog and a couple of striped cats, but you gotta watch out, them cats don't get the little rabbits. Lenny breathed hard. You just let them try and get the rabbits. I break their goddamn necks. I'll smash them with a stick. Kind of intense. He subsided, grumbling to himself, threatening the future cats, which might dare to disturb the future rabbits. George sat entranced with his own picture. When Candy spoke, they both jumped as though they'd been caught doing something reprehensible. Candy said, You know where's a place like that? George was on guard immediately. Suppose I do, he said. What's that to you? You don't need to tell me where it's at. Might be any place. Sure, said George. That's right. You couldn't find it in 100 years. Candy went on excitedly. How much they want for a place like that? George watched him suspiciously. Well, I could get it for $600. The old people that owns it is flat bust, and the old lady needs an operation. Say, what's it to you? You got nothing to do with us. Candy said, I ain't much good with only one hand. I lost my hand right here on this ranch. That's why they give me a job swamping. And they give me $250 because I lost my hand. And now I got 50 more saved up right in the bank, right now. That's 300, and I got 50 more coming in the end of the month. Tell you what, he leaned forward eagerly. Suppose I went in with you guys. That's $350 I'd put in. I ain't much good, but I could cook and tend the chickens and hoe the garden some. How'd that be? George half closed his eyes. I gotta think about that. We was always gonna do it by ourselves. Candy interrupted him. I'd make a will and leave my share to you guys in case I kick off, because I ain't got no relatives nor nothing. You guys got any money? Maybe we could do it right now. George spat on the floor disgustedly. We got $10 between us. Then he said thoughtfully, Look, if me and Lenny work a month and don't spend nothing, we'll have $100. That'd be $450. I bet we could swing her for that. Then you and Lenny could go get her started, and I'd get a job and make up the rest, and you could sell eggs and stuff like that. They fell into a silence. They looked at one another amazed. This thing they had never really believed in was coming true. George said reverently, Jesus Christ, I bet we could swing her. His eyes were full of wonder. I bet we could swing her, he repeated softly. Okay, so when you guys were kids, obviously I can't ask you this question, but it's kind of like when you were kids and you were talking with your friends or your cousins about something really great that you always wanted to do that you thought maybe would always be impossible, but now for some reason now it seems like you actually could do it. Like this thing that you always have wanted, you could actually maybe make work and come true. That's kind of how they're feeling right now. Candy sat on the edge of his bunk. He scratched the stump of his wrist nervously. I got hurt 4 years ago, he said. They'll can me pretty soon. Just as soon as I can't swap out no bunkhouses, they'll put me on the county. Maybe if I give you guys my money, you'll let me hoe in the garden, even after I ain't no good at it. And I'll wash dishes and little chicken stuff like that. But I'll be on our own place. And I'll be let to work on our own place, he said miserably. You seen what they done to my dog tonight? They says he wasn't no good to himself nor nobody else. When they can me here, I wish somebody'd shoot me. But they won't do nothing like that. I won't have no place to go, and I can't get no more jobs. I'll have $30 more coming. Time you guys is ready to quit. So in this part, we kind of find out something else about Candy and his dog. Obviously, he didn't want his dog to be shot, and we talked about this in class, that he didn't want his dog to be shot, not only because that he loved his dog, and Candy feels kind of useless, but he feels like he relates to his dog, like he's in the same place. He feels like his dog is old and useless and was good to nobody, and he feels like the way they felt about his dog, that's how they feel about him too, that he's old and useless and that nobody really wants him around. So he feels like in the end, like he's gonna be the exact same, that he'll just be shot or just let go, or pretty much they'll fire him and be like, okay, see ya, when he's too old to do anything. So he feels like he wants to jump on this with George and Lenny and go with them, because he feels like there, at least, he could have something worthwhile, and he could be with people who don't find him useless, and he could make something of his time and kind of be worthwhile. George stood up. We'll do her, he said. We'll fix up that little old place and we'll go live there. He sat down again. They all sat still, all bemused by the beauty of the thing. Each mind was popped into the future when this lovely thing should come about. George said wonderingly, suppose there was a carnival or a circus come to town, or a ball game, or any damn thing. Old Candy nodded in appreciation of the idea. We'd just go to her, George said. We wouldn't ask nobody if we could. Just say, we'll go to her, and we would. Just milk the cow and sling some grain to the chickens and go to her. And put some grass to the rabbits, Lenny broke in. I would never forget to feed them. When are we gonna do it, George? In 1 month. Right squack in 1 month. Know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna write to them old people that owns that place. That will take it. And Candy'll send $100 to bind her. Sure will, said Candy. They got a good stove there? Sure, got a nice stove. Burns coal or wood. I'm gonna take my pup, said Lenny. I bet by Christ he likes it there, by Jesus. Voices were approaching from outside. George said quickly, don't tell nobody about it. Just us three and nobody else. They're liable to can us. We can't make no stake. Just go on like we're gonna buck barley the rest of our lives. Then all of a sudden someday we'll go and get our pay and scram out of here. Lenny and Candy nodded, and they were grinning with delight. Don't tell nobody, Lenny said to himself. Candy said, George? Huh? I oughta shot that dog myself, George. I shouldn't oughta let no stranger shoot my dog. The door opened. Slim came in, followed by Curly and Carlson and Whit. Slim's hands were black with tar, and he was scowling. Curly hung close to his elbow. Curly said, well, I didn't mean nothing, Slim. I just asked you. Slim said, well, you've been asking me too often. I'm getting goddamn sick of it. If you can't look after your own goddamn wife, what do you expect me to do about it? You lay off of me. I'm just trying to tell you I didn't mean nothing, said Curly. I just thought you might have saw her. Well, why didn't you tell her to stay the hell home where she belongs, said Carlson. You let her hang around bunkhouses and pretty soon you're going to have something on your hands, and you won't be able to do nothing about it. Curly whirled on Carlson. You keep out of this unless you want to step outside. Carlson laughed. You goddamn punk, he said. You tried to throw a scare into Slim and you couldn't make it stick. Slim throwed a scare into you. You're yellow as a frog belly. I don't care if you're the best welter in the county. You come in for me and I'll kick your goddamn head off. Candy joined the attack with joy. Glove full of Vaseline, he said disgustedly. Curly glared at him. His eyes slipped on past and lighted on Lenny, and Lenny was still smiling with delight at the memory of the ranch. Okay, so in this part, they've just been out talking to, so when George and Lenny and Candy were all talking about getting their ranch together, Curly had gone out and confronted Slim about talking to his wife. And Slim's basically saying, like, I have nothing to do with your wife. I never talked to her. You need to leave me alone. And so Curly's all riled up, and he kind of looks over and sees Lenny, who's just smiling about the memory of the ranch of what they talked about. Like, Lenny hasn't been paying attention to this conversation whatsoever. But Curly thinks that Lenny's laughing at him. Curly stepped over to Lenny like a terrier. What the hell are you laughing at? Lenny looked blankly at him. Huh? Then Curly's rage exploded. Come on, you big bastard. Get up on your feet. No big son of a bitch is gonna laugh at me. I'll show you who's yella. Lenny looked helplessly at George, and then he got up and tried to retreat. Curly was balanced and poised. He slashed at Lenny with his left, and then smashed down his nose with a right. Lenny gave a cry of terror. Blood welled from his nose. "George!" he cried. "Make him leave me alone, George!" He backed until he was against the wall, and Curly followed, slugging him in the face. Lenny's hands remained at his sides. He was too frightened to defend himself. So Curly's just like punching him in the face. There's blood everywhere, and Lenny's just freaking out. George was on his feet yelling, "Get him, Lenny! Don't let him do it!" Lenny covered his face with his huge paws and bleated with terror. He cried, "Make him stop, George!" Then Curly attacked his stomach and cut off his wind. Slim jumped up. "The dirty little rat!" he cried. "I'll get him myself." George put out his hand and grabbed Slim. "Wait a minute," he shouted. He cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled, "Get him, Lenny!" Lenny took his hands away from his face and looked about for George, and Curly slashed at his eyes. The big face was covered with blood. George yelled again, "I said get him!" Curly's fist was swinging when Lenny reached for it. The next minute, Curly was flopping like a fish on a line, and his closed fist was lost in Lenny's big hand. George ran down the room. "Let go of him, Lenny, let go." So Curly's like punching him, so he makes one punch and Lenny just like grabs his fist in his hand and is just like crushing his hand. But Lenny watched in terror, the flopping little man whom he held. Blood ran down Lenny's face. One of his eyes was cut and closed. George slapped him in the face again and again, and Lenny still held on to the closed fist. Curly was white and shrunken by now, and his struggling had become weak. He stood crying, his fist lost in Lenny's paw. George shouted over and over, "Let go his hand, Lenny, let go. Slim, come help me while the guy got any hand left." Suddenly, Lenny let go of his hold. He crouched, cowering against the wall. "You told me to, George," he said miserably. Curly sat down on the floor, looking in wonder at his crushed hand. Slim and Carlson bent over him. Then Slim straightened up and regarded Lenny with horror. We gotta get him into a doctor," he said. "Looks to me like every bone in his hand is bust." "I didn't want to," Lenny cried. "I didn't want to hurt him." So like Curly's hand is basically like his bones are completely broken in his hand. Slim said, "Carlson, you get the candy wagon hitched up. We'll take him into Soledad and get him fixed up." Carlson hurried out. Slim turned to the whimpering Lenny. "It ain't your fault," he said. "This punk sure had it coming to him, but Jesus, he ain't hardly got no hand left." Slim hurried out and in a moment returned with a tin cup of water. He held it to Curly's lips. George said, "Slim, will we get canned now? We need the steak. Will Curly's old man can us now?" Slim smiled wryly. He knelt down beside Curly. "You got your senses in hand enough to listen?" he asked. Curly nodded. "Well then listen," Slim went on. "I think you got your hand caught in a machine. If you don't tell nobody what happened, we ain't going to. But you just tell and try to get this guy canned, and we'll tell everybody, and then will you get the laugh." "I won't tell," said Curly. He avoided looking at Lenny. Buggy wheels sounded outside. Slim helped Curly up. "Come on now, Carlson's gonna take you to a doctor." He helped Curly out the door. The sound of wheels drew away. In a moment, Slim came back into the bunkhouse. He looked at Lenny, still crouched fearfully against the wall. "Let's see your hands," he asked. Lenny stuck out his hands. "Christ almighty, I hate to have you mad at me," Slim said. George broke in. "Lenny was just scared," he explained. "He didn't know what to do. He told you, I told you nobody ought never to fight him. No, I guess it was Candy I told." Candy nodded solemnly. "This just what you done," he said. "Right this morning when Curly first lit into your friend, you says he better not fool with Lenny if he knows what's good for him. That's just what you says to me." George turned to Lenny. "It ain't your fault," he said. "You don't need to be scared no more. You done just what I told you to. Maybe you better go in the washroom and clean up your face. You look like hell." Lenny smiled with his bruised mouth. "I didn't want no trouble," he said. He walked toward the door, but just before he came to it, he turned back. "George, what you want?" "I can still tend the rabbits, George?" "Sure, you ain't done nothing wrong." "I didn't mean no harm, George." "Well, get the hell out and wash your face." Okay, so in the end, so when they get in this fight, Lenny obviously wins, even though he didn't want to hurt Curly, but Curly's punching him, and George is yelling at Lenny to fight back and to defend himself. So he grabs Curly's fist when he comes to punch him, crushes his hand completely, and in the end, George is worried about them getting fired. So he says, oh my gosh, like he doesn't want Curly to tell his dad that Lenny crushed his son's hand. Then he thinks they'll get fired from this ranch and they won't be able to save up money and get their own place. So Slim says to Curly, hey, if you say what happened, I'm going to tell everybody on the whole ranch that this guy beat you, that like you lost in a fight. And he says this because he knows that Curly is all about pride and wants to be like the best fighter and doesn't want his reputation ruined. So he says, if you better say your hand got caught in a machine. If you say that, then I won't tell everybody what really happened. So he does this to save George and Lenny from getting fired from the ranch. Okay, so I'm going to post this on Canvas right now, so just hopefully this works out. But for the chapters that we have to read for the rest of Mice and Men, I'll do it like this for you guys. So see you later. Have a good rest of your day.